Good morning, YouTube. This is pretty crazy because it's been about a year since I filmed my first video, so I'm a little bit nervous, but I feel like God is really trying to speak to his people about something, and I'm so fortunate to have this YouTube channel where I can speak. Not that I'm starting it up again, but that I just feel like God is trying to speak to his people about this, and so I wanted to share it with you today. And hopefully it will encourage you and you can share it with your friends or family or whoever you feel needs to hear this. So I was listening to a sermon on the weekend and it really got me thinking a lot, and the more I dug into this idea, the more confirmation I got just from different sources that God is really trying to say something here again. My topic that I want to speak about is expecting God's character and not his plan. So there's this story in John 6 where Jesus is talking to his disciples there were the 12, but then there were a whole lot of other people who were following Jesus that were Jewish, and Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. Whoever eats this bread will live forever." And these Jews hear this and they're a little bit confused, like, what does that mean? What do you mean we can eat of your flesh? Like, I don't understand that. And so they say to Jesus in verse 30, "What sign will you give us that we may see it and believe in you?" You see, what the Jews were expecting from a Messiah was someone who was going to save them from oppression of Roman rule, right? They were under the rule of the Romans and they thought that their Messiah would save them from the Romans. But we know now, looking back, that Jesus came for a way, way bigger purpose than to save them from an earthly power. It was to save both the Jews and the non-Jews, the Gentiles, from death forever by dying on the cross. Jesus didn't give them what they were expecting. They were waiting for the sign. What sign are you going to give us that we know we can believe in you? And he didn't give them that. He didn't give them the plan that they were expecting. But his plan was so much greater than that. And one of the saddest verses I think I've ever read in the Bible is this, John 6 verse 66. "Many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him." You see, they were so caught up on this plan that they were expecting God to do that they missed what he was doing. They missed Jesus. They missed the Savior, the Messiah himself. Let's talk about that in our lives, expecting God's plan, what that looks like. I think if we look at 2020, I saw a meme the other day, and I'm going to tell you what it said because it's just so funny. And it said, "It really sucks to have made a 5-year plan of what you want your life to look like in 5 years in 2015. Because we all know that 2020 has not turned out the way that any of us expected it to. And so we plan our lives. We set up these expectations. This is where I want to be in 5 years. These are the things I want to do. This is what I want God to accomplish in my life. And we have these expectations of how we think God will work and how we expect him to work. And we limit God to that. We limit God to a plan that we've created in our minds about how we think he's going to work. And I think just like many Jews had expectations of how their Savior would come, what their Messiah would do for them, they limited God to a plan. I have notes here in case you're wondering why I keep looking down. They limited God. They limited him by establishing a plan in their own minds. And this is really important for me to say, that it's not wrong to plan. And God has an amazing plan for your life. You can expect an amazing plan, but don't expect your plan. So where does this leave us? Pretty hopeless, because we can't plan. So what does our life look like? What can we expect from God? And this is the crux of the matter, is we can expect God's character. There's a verse in Hebrews 6 verse 17 to 19. It says, "Nature of his purpose, very clear to the heirs of what was promised, he confirmed it with an oath. God did this so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled to take hold of the hope set before us may be greatly encouraged. We have this hope as an anchor for our soul, firm and secure. I think two things that I take away from that verse is unchangeable, and God cannot lie. It is impossible for God to lie. Which means that what he says about his character is truth, and it can never change, regardless of the circumstance that we're in. It's like now, we are seeing so much change around us. We're seeing plans go out the window, but God is not changing. His character has not changed, and it will never change. So what are some of the things that God says about himself? He says that he is good, that he is ever present, he is kind, he is just, he is jealous, merciful, loving. You can expect those things from God. You can expect those characteristics, which also means you can expect an amazing plan for your life. Because he is outside of space and time, he will draw on those characteristics to shape the plan of your life. But it's not going to always look the way that you expect it to look. In Isaiah 55 verse 8 to 9, it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." I think if all the disciples, if all those Jews had expected God's character rather than his plan, they would have been open to believing that Jesus was on earth to free them not only from Roman oppression, which he didn't actually do at all, but to free them from sin and from death forever. God's plan was so much greater than they could have ever expected, but they weren't looking for God's character. They were looking for his plan. And when it didn't come out the way that they wanted it to, they turned away from Jesus and they rejected that. I think what I really want to speak about today is that we may be greatly encouraged, as that Hebrews verse says, that we have this hope as an anchor for our soul. We have the hope of expecting a good God to create a good plan for our lives because he has a good character. We're not expecting a plan. If anything was planned for this year, it's gone now. And so I just want to challenge everyone with this word. I hope it encourages you, but I want us to think about where do your expectations lie? Are you expecting a good God to come through for you? You see, I think the challenge for me, and this has really challenged me this week, and that's why I'm sharing it. The challenge for me is don't get to know God's plan. Get to know God's character. Because when we push to look to God's character, the plan doesn't really matter. Because we know it'll be great and we know it's going to be fruitful and good and incredible. But we know that because we know our God, not because we understand his plan. If you feel like there's someone you know that needs to hear this, please share it with them. Let's spend our time during this lockdown really engaging with who God is rather than what he has for us. And then trusting that the plan will happen the way that God chooses it to happen. Have an amazing week, and I hope this has encouraged you.